and there's been like a blow up of graphic novels and comic books that are telling our story now. I think it's kind of an easy medium to get into because we do have a lot of artists in our community, and also crowdfunding a comic book is a lot easier than crowdfunding a movie or a TV series or something like that. It doesn't really happen, right? So there's a big blow up in that, and I was in a class with Professor Hollenbeck in anthropology. And she starts off her class with asking the students. I was a grad student, I'm a grad student, and the class was mostly undergrads. She starts off the class with asking the participants like what they know about Native Americans. When they think about Native Americans, what did they think of? And there were so many old tropes that were not necessarily negative, but just like living in teepees and we're extinct, that sort of thing. So for me, I really want to kind of show what we're doing now and let people know that we are thriving. We're kind of slowly coming out of survival stage and into the thriving and stage. So that's kind of where my interests lie. When I do educate people, I do remind them of all the other heavier subjects, but I also want to bring out the joy. We have a lot of joy too, and hope. So that's kind of what I'm working on for my little corner of the world.
Thank you both for sharing. I feel like that key piece of joy and connection is kind of a crucial overlap between what motivates the work for both of you. And I really appreciate you speaking about that as we start. Jen, I specifically wanted to ask you, in terms of thinking about this wider trajectory and educating people about it, could you talk a little bit more about the land acknowledgement that Steve Denson gave us at the beginning of today and what it looked like creating that and why it matters?
Yeah, we've been working on it for probably since the beginning of summer. We looked at a lot of different universities, different organizations. Anthropology had already worked something up that we were able to use and get some accurate knowledge as far as who the land stewards were in this area. I'm from northern Montana on the Canadian border, so I know who's in which general areas, but as far as like this specific one, that's beyond my knowledge. So we worked on that. We have it put together. It's gone up to the people who make the big decisions to take a look at, and hopefully it'll be an official, there'll be official ceremony, and it will actually be a plaque or some sort of, not monument, this is kind of the wrong word, but some sort of physical presence on campus, so we can all be reminded. That's hopefully, after some community engagement, that would probably be the next step.
Thank you. It's been a joy to see that developing over the past few years as I've been at SMU, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Another question that I wanted to ask as we're sort of diving into y'all's work is I want to know, what are the top issues that your close communities face? Not everyone that's in attendance today is familiar with Indigenous issues and the particular work that you guys engage in. So I'd like to start with you, actually, Jody, if you could talk more about your work with MMIW and what that even means.
Yeah, so I guess like some top issues, I guess you would say, that we have to, I guess, kind of deal with or try to work around, when you do work like this, when it's very hyper-focused on an area, hyper-focused on individuals, we have to look at a lot of different things as per topics that feed into that crisis. So like one thing, when I was preparing for this, what I was thinking about was that, we deal with, like that, like what was mentioned, all the tropes about this or that, these things, teepees and things like that. But one of the biggest things I feel like is we deal with, we have to exclaim constantly that we are still here, that we exist, we're not, relegated to living in the past and historical figures. And once that happens, I kind of feel like once you start that conversation, you have to dive into, so what does needing to say that we are still here and we still exist, what does that mean, to a person's daily life, a community's daily existence, their reality? And I feel like then if you can understand that, then you dive into, what has that done for people and community and a way of life. And I kind of feel like once you get there, you have to look at like infrastructure and what that means to a people. And with our area, I feel like, of course there are things that lack and need to be improved. That infrastructure is key to keeping people safe and healthy. And being safe and healthy, that includes a numerous amount of things and different aspects of life, like space, space to be who you are freely and safely. We don't have a cultural center in our area. We have hundreds of tribes represented, things like that. We have to, find space to practice, what we do in our homes with each other. It's like we have to find these spaces. And that's where that joy aspect comes into. We have these things that can keep us healthy and happy and better mentally and physically and things like that. So I think that infrastructure piece is huge. And I think that's something that always needs to be looked into when dealing with a crisis. The crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And our organization is MMIW, but we help everyone. We help our male relatives, our two-spirit relatives. If a relative is missing, then we go to work and we do what we do. And I think that's something also having to navigate every aspect of a person's well-being. The things that we deal with are focused on being safe, but we have to ask a lot of questions about what safety means for a family. We deal with runaways, things like that. And there's just a lot of stigma attached to every level of the work that we do. So that's just, some of the biggest issues is education. Before we can actually do work, we have to educate. And there's a lot of education exhaustion when it comes to, educating about Indigenous people, especially American Indians in this country being dual citizens, what a citizenship entails. Then you deal with blood quantum, then you deal with not living in jurisdiction, not access to healthcare, who takes on a case, who's going to help, is there money? So many topics can be unpacked when dealing with this crisis.
Yeah, and like she said, when we have to explain ourselves all the time, when people think we don't exist, it dehumanizes us, right? We just become a thing as opposed to a people and a culture. And then when things come up, maybe something in the Supreme Court or some voting rights or something like that comes up, people are less likely to support it because they don't understand who we are and where we came from, and they think it's a non-problem, right? I mean, it hasn't been. I mean, and Jody might know the years better, but it seems like to me the MMIW stuff has really come up in like the last 5 years or so, and really come to the forefront. But it's been going on since contact, right? And it's something that finally is getting some media attention. But I mean, if you noticed the blogger that I don't remember her name, the blogger that was lost and found dead, I think in Utah, and was like all over the news for weeks. And friends of mine are like reading every article and where's her boyfriend and what's going on. And we have hundreds, thousands of missing Indigenous women that don't get any press, right? Because people don't think Indians even exist, right? So, or Indigenous people even exist. So I mean, if we don't have, if we aren't doing the education that Jody and I are doing, people dehumanize us because of that, because they don't know.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's so crucially important. And especially with MMIW, these past couple of years, you can't address something if no one's talking about the fact that it exists to begin with. So thank you for the relentless work that you're doing on that front. Jody, I really appreciated what you were saying about how women's safety and security was closely related to health infrastructure, because these things are all so closely intertwined, right? Because we're not people that exist just as a woman or just as someone with health needs. So I was wondering if either of you has any more insights about ways that other areas of Indigenous activism or beyond that influences your own specific work.
Yeah, so with yeah, there's just like there's so much to unpack with being safe, and we've been dealing, this has been our reality since, since, like Jen mentioned, since contact. MMIW groups across the country, refer to Pocahontas and Sacagawea as our first MMIW cases. It's, the founding of this country was violent, and that violence is still an everyday part of our reality. It hasn't stopped. Gender-based violence is a thing. It's a reality, and we have to face it. And just having the infrastructure to mentally be healthy impacts so much of our work. We don't have the resources, the mental health resources. We don't have the resources to eat as healthy as we would like, to be mentally healthy, to be physically healthy. We don't have the economic infrastructure to not have to be in unsafe situations to survive. And the stigmatism around, survival sex work or running away or anything like that. Those are things that are core issues that need to be looked upon, reflected on, and worked upon, to change, or this is going to continue. I mean, there's, just like the case that Jen mentioned, everybody, I was asked for, I don't know how many podcasts contacted me after that case. I was asked to do interviews about if we could talk about why this is the way it is, why she had so much media attention. And, we had to go and break down and understand the depth of, colonialism, colonization, and white supremacy. And that, there's a newer concept of, the white woman syndrome, when, and that's, it's the literal topic and concept that people are learning about, that's how we have to refer to it to get the attention of the difference in coverage of a case. So, I mean, there's so many different things to unpack there that directly affect how healthy and safe we are.
Jen, would you like to add anything on that front in terms of wider factors that influence your education work?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Jody and I are really in step with each other. She and I have very different experiences, because I grew up on my reservation, and she's was here because of relocation. And so for me, I again was around my culture, not saturated, but it was just part of everyday life, right? So I didn't really think about it a lot then, because it was just part of my community. And then I lived in Seattle. Seattle has a huge Indigenous community with lots of infrastructure. And though I moved down here, I did notice a lot that the population isn't as large. It's very vibrant. It's not as large, but like Jody said, we don't have a cultural center. There's no place for us to like meet and learn about each other. So that's kind of one of the reasons why one of the things I want to do here too is through the education I'm doing is figure out how we can come together as a unit, a Dallas-Fort Worth unit, and really work together to overcome some of these issues that we do have in this area.
Yeah, thank you for that. It does seem, I don't know, if we're thinking about the importance of physical space for any sort of community, but especially those historically affected by displacement and dislocation, it seems kind of ridiculous that we don't have a cultural center or anything like that in Dallas yet. I say I'm going to add yet to the end of that, very importantly. But yeah, thank you guys for that. Jen, you mentioned how you and Jody have different relationships with Dallas in terms of growing as people and growing into the work that you do. So I'd like to know more about what your Indigenous organizing and the history of it, even your personal history, if you'd like to share, looks like in the context of Dallas. So Jody, starting with you and how you've ended up with such impactful work that you're doing with the city of Dallas.
Yeah, so like I had mentioned earlier, was kind of thrust into this work as a teenager in regards to eliminating racist mascots within the Dallas Independent School District, which was something that was a battle taken on and led by Peggy Larney. She's the founder of American Indian Heritage Day in Texas. She, at the time, was leading the work with the American Indian Education Program. And this, this issue came up, and, she asked a youth council that I was a part of, our thoughts and what we wanted. And we had lots to say about it, of course. And so, we did this, and ever since then, it's just kind of built, within me to speak out more and use my voice more and just be more active. And that was kind of everything that started everything off for me, especially in the area, and had a huge factor to, I guess, my care for the community, for the area. This is home. My parents both came on relocation. My mother as a teenager and my father as a young adult on his own. And, I'm a part of that generation of, we're the first people, we were born here, our parents, our families came on relocation, but we're the ones that were born here. So, this is home. We're not, our grandparents and parents, a lot of our families are used to hearing our parents and grandparents say, when we go back home or going back home and things like that. And, a lot of us now, my age, parents having families now, we don't know that home. This is our home. So our roots are here. And, there's a lot of care that goes into our community. And, growing up here, amongst not just American Indian people or my tribe, growing up with different races, different neighborhoods in a huge city like this, you learn the needs of poor communities differently than just on a reservation. You see the differences all over the city, and that really shaped what I do within the city of Dallas as well. I've done a lot of different solidarity work, and I take that work very serious, and it's really shaped what I do. I've organized around defunding the police, city budget, things like that. And I think understanding that has helped me understand what I need to do for my community, the American Indian community. And I know how to organize a little differently. I started organizing with, different events, different cultural events, powwows, community events, things like that. And it just level after level of care and trust, and wanting what I want for my own family, for my entire community. And I think that's what, again, that really shapes what I do for not just the American Indian community, but for Dallas. When I was asked to be a commissioner for the Arts and Culture Council, I was really excited just because, it was another platform. I didn't really think about myself in the position of, I got to learn all of this too now on top of what I do, or now I have even more meetings or anything like that. I thought about what can I present to this group of people that I haven't had the chance to do so. What can I talk about? Can I educate on, how our views about art, are different than, arts and culture. It's one for us. It's not separate. These things are very inherent and important and sacred to us. And that thinking is just what I want to do in the city on many different levels and spaces.
Yeah, and my work's a little more hyper local. I really haven't moved outside of the SMU family at this point, because I just see there's such a need here. I mean, SMU has so many great attributes and so many great programs, and I don't understand how we're so close to Oklahoma and there's not a bevy of Indian students here, Native American students here on this campus. So for me, getting more students, the students that are here, we can't find them. We can't get lists from admissions on the Native American students. I mean, we're trying to like gather those people together and to give them a better experience here, to allow them to find community as well. Because it is so important for any culture to have a community, especially when you're away from home, when you're feeling like a fish out of water, because you are one of, maybe that we know of, like 6 or 7 Native students on campus. There are 3 faculty here on campus, and then Dr. Hollenbeck in anthropology is very active as well, and like trying to start a community here. It's a different SMU is a different culture than a lot of universities I've been at, so it's a little bit more difficult in that sense. But really, I just I've been active in so many things for so long. My first march was probably like in 1991. Is Take Back the Night, like the first month I was in college, and so I've marched and petitioned and everything else for so many other things, and I really hadn't gotten into. I'm of course always supportive, but I hadn't really worked specifically for Indigenous rights and to more FaceTime kind of thing with that. So I've really kind of taken it on the last little bit, and like I said, I'm just kind of staying right at this point, kind of hyper local with just the SMU community, because I think there are a lot of great things about SMU that would definitely benefit Indigenous students.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right that like SMU community, there's still so much to be done, even though it is a much smaller geographic area. And I really appreciate the work that both of you are doing on that front, with getting into new spaces and doing, like we're talking about, that just constant education about very fundamental facts of life for people who navigate it every day, and trying to bridge that, and especially in an environment like SMU, where there might be only 6 or 7 Native students that you've been in direct contact with, and then it's hard to then like push outside of that and like dream and enact something bigger, knowing that more is possible for campus. So I also really appreciate the visionary work that both of you guys necessarily have to carry through this work to do it in the way that you do. So thank you for that. But in terms of building those bridges and that education and trying to talk to, so for example, at SMU, a lot of our administrators, almost all, if not all of them, are not Indigenous, but it would be wonderful to have more allies in the work that you guys are doing, or if there is a role for that. And so I would love to hear from y'all, what role, if any, do you see for allies in bridging solidarity for Indigenous people?
Yeah. So it's funny too, like you mentioned how like there's just a handful of students, on the entire campus. That was my reality growing up in elementary, middle school, high school. Like in Dallas, you were lucky if you had any classes with somebody that was American Indian. Elementary school, it was, if my sister still was in the same school because she's a little bit older than me, if she wasn't there, I might be the only American Indian student. So I mean, it's a very real struggle, to balance your identity and your work and your passions and your, all the hard work that you do, all your the really intense stuff. But yeah, that just mentioning that made me think of that. And leading into, is there a space for allies? I think there's always a space for allies. I think there's always a need, there's a great need, especially, if for like with Native issues, if there's non-Native allies, we can get a lot done, with MMIW work. I know, especially with, grassroots organizing and work, it's kind of hard sometimes to see, like how like a non-Native ally is going to help. But And I see that a lot with MMIW work. Sometimes, embracing allies, especially non-Native allies, is really hard for a lot of people. You have to understand the things that that we've dealt with historically, being, not just violence and colonization, but being exploited and, and being afraid to be who you are. Our religious practices were outlawed and illegal until 1978. It's not that long ago that that was the reality. It was illegal to be who we are, or things like voting rights and things like that. So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of things that go into a fear of embracing somebody and letting somebody into your space and your safe space and your where you're comfortable and where you do your work. So there's a lot of work for allies to do the work properly and do the work in a very respectful way. But it's so important, with specifically with MMIW Texas Rematriate, we have a member within our organization who's a professor at TCU, and doing that education and doing the grunt work has paid off because he's been so accepted into our community and has done so much for our organization on that campus. And it just shows what can be done. We have a scholarship, an MMIW scholarship at TCU, and and things like that. I joke with them all the time about you're decolonizing academia in this. We're seen as experts. You're this a very wealthy campus. Invites us to speak and pays for our work, and that right there is the work that allies do, because I could not have done that on my own. I could not have opened that door, put my foot in the door and said, this is an issue that this very white, wealthy campus can benefit from understanding about this lecture or this topic or anything like that. So it's hard, but I encourage everyone to do the work, do that soul searching to see where you're comfortable with fitting in. Because as a non-Native person, you really have to look at how you benefit from certain things, and is that going to affect the work that you do? There's just a lot to look into, but I fully support and embrace allies. I think that's the way that we're going to get a lot of the things that we need. Getting our needs met is number one, and I think that can happen with healthy allyship.
Yeah, and I think healthy is definitely the key to that too. Like, let the Indigenous people take the lead. Let us work with us, not down to us, kind of thing. I mean, there's been, especially like in the academic world, historians, anthropologists, there's been so much bad blood with Native people because of exploitation of our history, of our culture. It is difficult for some people, but I mean, we don't have enough manpower to get done what we need to get done if we don't allow allies in and work with them. I mean, Native people have always been very welcoming to outsiders and to working with outsiders, and maybe too welcoming at some points, right? So we really need those allies. I mean, every minority group needs their allies. I mean, one of the biggest during the civil rights movement, the American Indian movement and the Black Panthers worked hand in hand to get a lot of things done. So, I mean, we need to make sure that we do welcome in anyone who wants to help with a good heart.
Yeah, thank you guys for that. I definitely think that being involved in caring, but also following Indigenous leadership in that is like you said, Jen, a crucial piece. So thank you for that. I'd like to shift to a couple quick audience questions before we start wrapping up. But one of our audience members was wondering, Jen, if you could tell us a little bit more about the course you're working on at SMU and the importance of creating this course for the campus community.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about it, obviously, or else I wouldn't be doing it. There are so many current popular culture artists. I mean, there's fashion artists. B. Yellowtail does amazing fashion. There's actually an Indigenous a fashion week in Vancouver, Vancouver, Canada, not Vancouver, Washington, with our own take on fashion. So we're not talking like the cultural regalia that we wear at ceremonies, but appreciation. So the versus appropriation versus appreciation, which I think is probably something that we should stop for half a second and talk about. Like you can appreciate Native art, Native fashion, Native music by consuming it, and that's perfectly fine. It's when you appropriate our culture, especially our religious practices, when you say you're Indigenous when you're not, or that's when we get into the appropriation issues. Like we just had Halloween. Thankfully, I didn't see one Indian maiden this Halloween, which was really nice because usually they're everywhere. And I haven't actually seen any with Thanksgiving going by. I haven't seen any pilgrims and Indians either. Little pilgrims Indians running around. So that was also nice. But as far as my class goes, I'm going to be talking about just all the interesting things that are happening. There's a great hip hop, Indigenous hip hop scene right now. Superman was just here this last weekend. Unfortunately, the day got moved and I couldn't make it down there to see him, but he's an incredible hip hop artist, hip hop R&B. He blends Native American drumming, flute music in with contemporary music, and it's really incredible. There's an electric powwow scene, electric powwow music. The Hallucination is actually going to be here in February in Deep Ellum. I got my tickets right there on the wall. They're ready to go because I print things out because I'm 1,000 years old. There's that. And like I said before, there's graphic novels, comic books. If you're keeping up with Marvel, Echo, who's a deaf Indigenous woman, made her Marvel premiere, Marvel, not comic, but TV movie premiere last night or this week. The episode that was released this week on the Hawkeye series. There's so many things going on as far as like what we're doing and how we're living in our world. Sorry, that is really important. That we see these things out there because it does. As I was talking about before about dehumanization, this is humanizing us, right? It's making people realize that we're doing exactly the same things. We're professors, we're on arts councils, we're doing all sorts of incredible things all the time, but because we're unseen, people don't know that, right? They just see us again as in a John Wayne movie, and that's not what we're doing, and that's not what we're at. We're thriving and surviving and doing incredible things. I forgot about literature. There's great literature. Louise Eldridge just won the Pulitzer this year for her book. I can't remember the name of it right now, off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many incredible popular contemporary things that are happening right now with our world.
Yeah, thank you for that. Especially in human rights circles, like a lot of our students are in, it's so easy to get caught up in the active resistance and education. And like you said, Jen, the survival and fighting for basic rights and security. It's really refreshing to hear about all the ways that there's this artistic and cultural thriving and carving out spaces in major institutions like Marvel. It's really exciting to hear about that. So thank you. One more audience submitted question. Jody, I think I'll direct this one at you, but Jen, if you have anything to add, go for it. But one of our audience members was wondering about policies by Deb Haaland, our current Secretary of the Interior, and her Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women initiatives, and if that's changed anything in your work yet.
No, I wouldn't say, there's big changes, but that's how government works, that's how that's how politics works. Somebody gets to office, doesn't mean everything changes immediately. So changes haven't really been seen, but there are tons of MMIW groups, MMIR groups all over the country that are hoping it's different than, Operation Lady Justice. That was started under the Trump administration and nothing has come of it. Looking at how that went, there were there were times where I participated in the sessions for Operation Lady Justice, and even just the tech issues were astounding. And that doesn't sound like a big thing, but if you're going to do a task force or have a task force that directly affects American Indian people, you have to look at the infrastructure again. A lot of people didn't have Wi-Fi, had crappy Wi-Fi, things like that, that hindered just listening to the people. So things like that, I hope, are some of the first and biggest changes that come with some of Secretary Holland's initiatives. She's been very vocal about bringing attention to this crisis, and so we'll see what that entails. Some people are very, very hopeful, and some are very hesitant, because again, it's politics, it's government, it's task force that aren't necessarily led by the on the ground grassroots people that are actually out searching for people. So how will this task force ever know what we deal with? So those are just a few things. That's my take. I'm hopeful, but we'll see, and I'll just keep doing what I do here on the ground. And Jen, I'll see you at that concert. I have tickets to already.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jody. That sense of cautious optimism, I think, can be applied to a lot of different work. So thank you. Couple questions then as we start wrapping up and getting ready for our keynote presentation tonight. Jody, Jen, this one, whoever wants to go first, I would love to hear from you a time that you felt powerfully seen, heard, or celebrated. I know it's a big one.
It's actually been really great this Native American Heritage Month. Things were happening on campus that we didn't have to organize. Like the school was organizing them on their own. This event, I was happy to help out in any way, but you guys did all the organization as opposed to the Native American group having to do all the organization for Native American Heritage Month. I think that was really an important step for the university, because I kind of feel like during Native American Heritage Month, we become professional Indians for that month. Like our job is to be the Indian, and to make sure that things are are happening. So I really feel like maybe not heard, but definitely I feel like a change, and maybe what we're doing is actually working, right? So there's the work we're putting in as far as educating. Again, for me, just in my little SMU bubble, stuff's happening, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. This month was kind of refreshing. And I don't think I've ever said that about the fall in general. Autumn is rough for American Indian people. We have Major League Baseball, we have football, we have Halloween and costumes, and Columbus Day. You're just bombarded with things to remind you why you're in the position you are in the world and why you deal with the things that you do. And it's like people are finally listening. People are finally listening, and that's new. That's something brand new for me. And like I said, I've been speaking what I feel like is my whole life, and it can be exhausting to relive historical trauma or intergenerational trauma. And so having events that you don't have to plan and you don't have to exploit your own pain is very refreshing to see that our community is thriving enough to have these cultural spaces where we have we have not only drumming and singing and dancing, but the following weekend we had Indigenous hip hop represented, and those things are very, very refreshing. And so I kind of feel like where I like with that refreshing that ease that I've had in this past month or so, because it's so brand new. Like I'm not joking how new that is. I've had a lot of people ask for help to make things happen on their own. Or I was uplifted in different ways. And one way, a local photographer asked if she could take my pictures. And I was just like, why do you want to take my pictures? And she's just like, I want to uplift an American Indian woman in this community. And, somebody suggested you and you're amazing and all this stuff. So on this day, actually, when I went, I I deal with anxiety and panic attacks. I actually had a panic attack because of issues not regarding that. And I calmed myself down and went. My daughter went with me, and I had my photos taken, and my daughter was sitting there just giddy and was like, oh, I'm so proud of my mom. And I think that is the most I've felt seen in a very, very long time, even though I have massive platforms to speak and share. But having that opportunity to have my picture, her picture taken, and her be so excited to be who we are, to embrace that, like wanting to wear her jewelry and her culture and, just be her, I think was probably the biggest way I've felt seen in a very long time.
Thank you both for sharing such beautiful experiences. I hope that there's, of course, so many more of those to come, and looking forward to that for you both. I did want to recognize that our keynote speaker, Winona LaDuke, has hopped on the call. We're finishing up our local panel right now, and then we're going to get started with that keynote. So I can't wait to hear it. But our last question, actually, for our two panelists that are with us tonight, I would love to hear about the future. Big, scary thing to think about sometimes, but I would love to hear from you each as we close. What do you hope the future looks like, either within your specific work or more broadly? Another big one, so whoever has things to say, go for it.
I think the biggest thing that I would like to see in the future, of course, with my newer position within the arts and culture world within our city, just to recognize a lot of our culture bearers and what they do as art and culture in that sense of that world and that scope. But I think, and I feel, more importantly, with MMIW work in regards to that, my biggest hope for the future is to have better relationships with organizations and entities that can help us find people. We can reach out all we want, but sometimes it feels like it falls on deaf ears where, to listen to our needs, so that's my biggest hope for our MMIW work, is that it's not just looked at as, this is happening. Let me pull up with a sign and, a red handprint, and, it's so much more than that. And I hope that's my biggest hope, is that you go beyond the face of MMIW and you look for what you can do with actions and your connections to resources, connections to law enforcement and private investigators and forensic scans on phones and things like that. Like those are things that help us keep families together and communities whole and safe and happy. So I think that's my biggest hope.
Yeah, and I'm really excited for the future. I mean, I'm gonna sound like I need to get out my walker or something like that, but the kids are doing such cool things right now. I mean, the generation coming up behind us is just the ingenuity and the creativity. Like I said before, we're coming out of survival mode into thriving mode. And the younger generations are just grabbing that and running. And I mean, like I said, the art, the music, everything that's happening right now is just so exciting. There's still a lot of work to do. I mean, trust me, we're not out of the woods yet, but it's really exciting to see what's happening, because these things wouldn't have happened when I was young. I mean, again, big comic book nerd, when Chief introduced himself to Wonder Woman in the first Wonder Woman movie, and he did it in my language, it still tears me up, right? I could never have imagined that. And these things are happening now, and it's just so amazing. So yeah, I have tons of hope, tons of excitement. I think things are going the right direction. Lots of work to do, but excited.
Yes, thank you. That definitely ties back to Jody's point earlier about this cautious optimism and looking towards such a bright future, but knowing that there's so much work that it's going to take to get there, and in so many ways. But thank you both so much for your incredible insights tonight. We're so grateful for you for joining us. And we hope that both our Human Rights Council and our program will be able to continue to support the work happening on campus, but also in the greater Dallas community, in your communities. I'm now going to pass our virtual mic to Bethany to introduce our keynote for tonight.
Thanks so much, Ash. The local Indigenous Voices panel was incredible, and I learned so many lessons about connectivity, bridging solidarity, and remembrance. And I too am very, very excited for the future. So thank you so much, Jody and Jen, for the insights that you gave us. For those of you who are just now joining us, my name is Bethany Bass. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Strategic Director of the Human Rights Council. And I am so thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Winona LaDuke. Winona LaDuke is a Harvard-educated economist, environmental activist, author, hemp farmer, grandmother, and a two-time former Green Party vice president candidate with Ralph Nader. LaDuke recognizes and specializes in rural development, economic, food and energy sovereignty, and environmental justice. Living and working on the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota, she leads several organizations, including Honor the Earth, co-founded with the Indigo Girls 28 years ago, Anishinaabe Agricultural Institute, A King and Winona's Hemp. These organizations develop and model cultural-based sustainability development strategies, utilizing renewable energy and sustainable food systems. She is also an international thought leader and lecturer in climate justice, renewable energy, and environmental justice, plus an advocate for protecting Indigenous plants and heritage in food, from patenting and genetic engineering. She has written 7 books, including Recovering the Sacred, All Our Relations, Last Standing Woman, The Winona LaDuke Chronicles, and her newest work, To Be a Water Protector, The Rise of the Wendigo Slayers. Thank you so much for joining us, Winona.
Ani Nindoe Maganado. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you for inviting me today, and I'm glad to be able to visit with you and share some remarks. Binisi Queen Jinikas Makwando Dam Gababani Kagish Kaniganing and Dunjabami Gwitch. So I'm telling you where I'm from, which is the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota. And this month in our language is called Manadu Gisasoons, which is the little spirit moon. And the moons that follow this are Gishi Banadu Gisis, the Great Spirit Moon, Neme Gisis, the Sucker Moon, Onabana Gisis. That is the hard crusted snow moon. That's around March. And then we have a moon that's called in April. It's Kigami Ziki Gisis, which is the maple sugaring moon. I thought you might like to hear some of my language because I heard a little bit in your conversation some discussions about the languages of Indigenous people. And that's my language. And in, I don't know if you also noticed that in our language, there was no Roman emperors that are named in our calendar. It's possible to have an entire worldview that has nothing to do with empire. Now, I was thinking to show you some slides and pictures from my community. Is that good? And our work? I'm gonna try the old host disable participant screen sharing. So you have to enable me to join you. You are so great for doing that. Thank you. All right. So this is, can you see that? Perfect. Okay, so this is some art from my community. This is downtown Duluth. And, you know, there's a lot of talk about the struggles of Indigenous women that are many of us missing and murdered, the highest rates in the country. But this woman is not missing and murdered, and she is downtown Duluth, and she's about 20 feet wide and about 40 feet tall, and she's a water protector like me. And so I like to show a little bit of the art from my community. And this is where I live. This is Lower Rice Lake on my reservation, and that is my friend Don Goodwin with me. And I guess what I want to show you is that that is what wild rice looks like. Menomen, our most sacred food. And that rice is grows only in this territory. And so what you're looking out there is a lake that is covered with rice at the season of Menominee Geesis, which is in August. No, you know, there's a conflict that has been going on for a long time between two worldviews. And I think of it in many ways as exemplified by these two individuals. One of them is Sitting Bull on the left, and the other one is Custer on the right. And in this world, you know, the conflict has been long. Indigenous people and other people of color have really borne the brunt of this conflict. But so it is not a new conflict. But the story I'm going to tell you about our battle on Line 3 has its origins in this same conflict over who gets to control the future. And, you know, at this moment in time, I would say that we are in this, you know, in our teachings or prophecies as Anishinaabe people, this is known as the time of the seventh fire. And we're told that we have a choice between two paths. One path our ancestors referred to as scorched but well-worn. And the other path they said was green. And I believe the scorched path is well outlined in the world we live in today. You know, we have essentially catastrophes of biblical proportions. You know, I know that you are at a Methodist university, and when I say catastrophes of biblical proportions, I'm talking about the fact that the West is on fire, you know, a good portion of the year. The North was on fire as well. To the north, we have polar ice caps that are melting. To the east, we have all kind of other problems, political and otherwise. And to the south, we have hurricanes and storms. And then we have a pandemic. So what we have is catastrophes that, you know, I have not seen in my lifetime, nor have your parents or you. And in that time, it's a good time to take a moment and pause and think what it is we are doing that we could perhaps do better. And in that is this moment. As in Anishinaabe, we are instructed to make a choice between two paths, one well-worn and scorched, and one which is green. And that is what I'm going to talk about, is that transition. But I want to say that these pictures that are on the land are also pictures that are, you know, we don't know how much it's going to cost to fix these things. And the price, no city or county or state or tribal government has a price tag that is allocated, set aside for climate change related disasters. But I believe that the spin that we are now in our economy is a reflection of some of the challenges that we face ahead. And, you know, these challenges really have to do with how we're going to live in the future. So I want to talk about our little battle up here to keep things good. You know, I live in the place where there is wild rice all around. I live in the place where there is, you know, wolves and eagles and swans and duck and fish and 10,000 lakes. And I live in a place where Enbridge, a Canadian corporation, has just come and put a large pipeline project through our land over our bodies, you know, over our bodies. I spent 8 years trying to fight the Enbridge Corporation. I spent 8 years with my tribe. I testified at every hearing. I showed up at every meeting. I submitted every recommendation, all opposition, all notes, as did my tribal government. The governor who said that he would, you know, consult with Indian tribes, Indian people, did not, and instead approved a Canadian multinational called Enbridge to cross our land with a pipeline that carries 915,000 barrels a day of the dirtiest oil in the world, tar sands oil. And what is wrong with that is a lot. And in what is wrong with that is the fact that that's the equivalent to about 50 new coal-fired power plants. And we don't need that in a time of climate catastrophe when it's a code red for the environment. And so, having exhausted my legal recourse, last December 1st, a year ago, they began construction of this pipeline. And so I joined with thousands of Minnesotans to stand and say that that was wrong. to say that we stood there and said that this is the wrong thing to do for the people of Minnesota, for Mother Earth, and for all the relatives, whether they have wings or fins or roots or paws. And so, you know, we stood and we got arrested. A lot of us got arrested. As a young man, I just love this picture, Army Corps of Engineers in downtown Duluth, you know. I don't know how the heck that kid got up there, but I was like, that's awesome and you look cool. So this is our driveway. When the police of Minnesota come to stop you from opposing the pipeline company. I'll leave this picture in here and you can just look at that picture, because you know what we have here is a situation where the police of Minnesota, in order to pass the approval for this pipeline project, it's called a certificate of need. The state of Minnesota required Enbridge, a Canadian multinational that is a pipeline company, to pay for the police of Minnesota. And so they had to pay for the police to install the project. And so basically the police who are pledged to protect and serve were now forced to protect and serve a Canadian multinational corporation over the home team. And so a lot of people got arrested, and this is my arrest. Here I'm sitting with 6 elderly women, and we are, that journalist who's there behind us, she also got arrested, but we all were arrested, and I spent 3 nights in jail in northern Minnesota for the crime of being a water protector. So I'm here to say, you know, some laws are not right, and this one was not right. And 1,000 people got arrested in Minnesota over the course of this summer. The Walz administration in Minnesota and the Biden administration stood by and watched it all happen. And it was wrong. And my problem is now a lot of other people's problem, because this pipeline that goes through us also connects to Line 5, which goes through Kalamazoo, where they have the single largest oil spill in US mainland history. And then also up through the Straits of Mackinac, where Enbridge has a 62-year-old pipeline underneath the Great Lakes. And the governor of Michigan has asked them to close it down, revoke their permits, and they are still going. So what I'm saying is that I think that, you know, in the infrastructure bill that is forwarded by President Biden, it's important that there's infrastructure for people and not for Canadian pipeline companies. I'm not opposed to pipes. I want water pipes. I want sewer pipes. I don't want pipes for Canadian tar sands oil. I want them to be done. And so, you know, this is the world that we live in. And I've spent 8 years trying to stop this. And in the process, other pipelines have been stopped. The Keystone XL pipeline was stopped, the second largest tar sands pipeline, and the Jordan Cove pipeline was stopped, another pipeline that was intended to go, Canadian tar sands oil intended to go into Canadian fracked oil to the West Coast, and the Constitution pipeline was stopped. So pipelines can be stopped by people, little people like me too. So, you know, I'm partway through my remarks, and take a breath. That was about the bad stuff that I don't like, that I gotta fight. And let's say that, what if we make something better? That's what I wanna do. I wanna make a much more beautiful world with less war and pollution in it, and more organic food and music. How about that? So, having said that, I've been working, my community is working on what is called the just transition. Maybe they call that the Green New Deal. Maybe they call that the Biden infrastructure plan, or maybe they call it the Sitting Bull plan, because that is the great political leader of the Lakota people who said, let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. Let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. That's a good leader. That's a good leader, because the future must be made by all of us, not just some of us, and it must benefit Mother Earth as well as the people. So this is what we're doing in my little community. This is where I live. Live on this farm with a bunch of kids. These are my grandkids and some of their friends and some other kids that came to live with me because it was a pandemic and they didn't want to go to school and they couldn't. And so I just moved out on the farm. became horsemen, and learned how to drive teams of horses, and learned how to grow food. So that's what I do. I farm, and I farm with horses. That's what I do. And this is when we're not farming with horses. We have some tractors too, but this is the girl team out there about to take it on a field, put in some beans. I believe that's what we did in this picture. And I just want to say that this is who I work with, a lot of cool people who work hard. And then this woman here, Kara Knowles, she's one of my favorites. Here she is driving a team of ponies to put in a cornfield. And that was super fun. So, you know, I'm interested in the idea of getting the fossil fuels out of my agriculture system, because I think that fossil fuels shouldn't be in everything. You know, we didn't have a lot of fossil fuels in our agriculture till about 70 years ago, and I swear it's killing us. You know, so what am I trying to say? You got things like pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. Those are all made with fossil fuels. They all end with the word "side," which, from what I know, is a suffix they use in genocide, homicide, and suicide. So I think that's a bad idea to put on your food. And more than that, I think that we should get some of the fossil fuels out of it so that things like maybe a shrimp doesn't travel from, I think they get raised in Scotland and deveined in China and sent to a Walmart near you. It's too far for a shrimp to travel. So I'm interested in doing a lot less with fossil fuels and growing a lot more local food. I'm interested in keeping my wild rice. This is what it looks like when you harvest that crop that I showed you a picture of. This is my grandson, Ande Gunsneelan, pulling me through the rice, and we're grabbing some rice. You can see me knocking it into my boat, into my canoe. And then we grow cool potatoes. Those are potatoes. Now, why am I showing you this? Because when America was great, there was 900 varieties of potatoes. That's what I think. And we grow 17 varieties here. I don't grow anything that quite looks like that, except for those purple potatoes. I grow purple potatoes in great numbers. Some fingerlings. But why is that important? Because agrobiodiversity is much more adaptable in times of climate change. Agrobiodiversity is only produced by small farmers like me. You don't get agrobiodiversity from Monsanto. You don't get agrobiodiversity from Syngenta. And one thing that the Irish potato famine probably should have taught us is that you don't want to have one kind of potato. As the climate changes and the world changes around us, you should have a lot of different varieties of food, because then you're going to have a better shot at some of them surviving. And so these are some pictures of some potatoes from the Peruvian Potato Museum. And that museum in Lima, I think, the potato varieties are being studied by UN climatologists to figure out how to adapt varieties. So features in local foods. There's a local squash we grow, and I always think squashes are all about possibility. This one here is about 1,600 seeds in it, so you know that baby want to grow more squash. So that has like twice the vitamins and half the calories of market squash, and it's all full of antioxidants and all kind of cool things. So I'm saying that organic local agriculture is part of what we need to do in the just transition or the Sitting Bull plan. And then we need to grow some hemp. I'm a hemp farmer. I've been growing for 7 years. I have a state of Minnesota permit, and I have a federal permit to grow hemp. And I grow varieties that are for fiber. Now, what am I doing? This is what I'm doing. This is my fiber hemp. And this hemp here is intended to, see, it looks like bamboo. And that tall, lanky kid there is my son. I suppose we look kind of alike in this moment. We'll go like that. But it looks like bamboo. It grows really fast. In about 4 months, it'll grow that tall, and it sequesters a lot of carbon, which is what we need to do right now. It does sequester carbon, and it also does a lot for your topsoil. So this is our first crop we did in 2015. And this is what you can do with it. So think about this. You know, 20 weeks versus 20 years, 10 tons of acre. This is a fiber. Our recycling, much better. Less chemicals, you know, breathes in more carbon dioxide. Look at that. You know, what you need is to make your paper, your packaging materials, so you can get all your stuff from Amazon Prime, make it out of hemp. And then what about some clothing? That fiber hemp that I was showing you, I was thinking I had some sitting right here. I do. That fiber hemp I was showing you is what you make clothing out of. Like this shirt is a hemp shirt. Yeah. I'm sorry to do this to you, but look, this is my hemp. Can you see that? Oh, this is my hemp. This is a rope, because it turns out that the strongest ropes and all of those sails that some of your ancestors came willingly or not willingly with, all those sails were made out of canvas. And the word canvas comes from the word cannabis. So what am I saying? That's a lot of potential versus cotton, a lot of pesticides. And then you can build things with it. Hempcrete is something that they're using all around the world and have for thousands of years. And they also, you can make all kind of other stuff. I'm mostly interested in hemp insulation. And the other thing we do in my community is we make these solar thermal panels. So, you know, there's one thing in Minnesota, it's cold as hell, but it's also sunny in the winter. So this is what a solar thermal panel looks like. And this solar thermal panel is on the south facing wall of a house. This is a housing project near my house. And also my other nephews over here on the left. And so we put it on a south facing wall. And when you put it on a south facing wall, it's like a box with, you know, about 8 inches, I don't know, 12 inches in it, I think. And the glass, special kind of glass, collects the heat in that box. And when it gets to 90 degrees, on the thermostat, it clicks on a blower fan and blows hot air in your house. And so in the north, that could save about 20% of your heating bill. That makes a lot of sense. You know, why wouldn't you want to save 20% on your heating bill and not have to pay that to, you know, your propane company? So that's what we do. And this is where we build them. In this facility, those are my dogs. We've been manufacturing now for 3 years. And we're growing this manufacturing out. And so look, you know, who wants to hang around with fossil fuels for a long time? You know, it's been a good run. I spent my whole life in the fossil fuel economy, but what I really want to do is move to a renewable energy economy, hopefully without a lot of lithium batteries in it. And I want to do that with renewables like wind and solar. And I want electric cars, and that's what I want. And I feel like, why wouldn't you want that? Because just think of it this way. I learned this a few years ago. A combustion engine, like in the car that I have, is only 16% efficient. Yeah, 16%. An electric engine is 65% efficient. You know, combustion engine has all those extra parts, a drivetrain, electric engine pretty much straight through. Why is that important? Because why the heck would you want to drive around in a car that's only 16% efficient? So that's what we want to do. And we need energy that is not just big, but we need it little. This is a solar photovoltaic project. That's what that is. And that woman in the slide, her name is Molina Lubicon. She lives in a little village in northern Alberta in the middle of the damn tar sands where all of that oil is coming from. This woman lives up there, and for her master's thesis at the University of Victoria a few years ago, she asked me to be on her master's committee. And I was super excited. And so for her master's project, she put up this solar project in her village. And she put it up for her health clinic, which amazingly enough, in the middle of the oil sands of Alberta, is running on a gas generator. They didn't even have electricity going to their facility. So she built this, as her master's thesis. And I just want to say that because for all students that are doing any kind of academic work, you know, she didn't do a literature review. She didn't do a project proposal. She did a project for her master's thesis. Melina Lubicon, one of the great young women leaders that I know. And this is a bigger project. This is a Navajo solar project. And I think it's 26 megawatts. That's city stuff. You know, this is like small town stuff. So, you know, this is what the future looks like. And this is what Indian people are doing. Native American people are doing. So this is my village too, the village with the solar panel in it. This is Pine Point. And, you know, what am I saying? Like my village has a 50-year-old HUD housing project in it, old housing stock. And old is fine if it's like classic. It's not necessarily fine if it's poor people's housing. But this one here, we decided to paint it up to make it beautiful. And that's actually those little girls there are a couple of my relatives. So I'm showing you all this picture because this is the Port of Duluth. And I keep thinking in the Port of Duluth that why would I see wind turbine parts coming in? Now, these are all wind turbine parts coming into Port of Duluth because it's the furthest inland port. The furthest inland port. And so if the wind turbines are coming from Europe, which these are, they got to go to Duluth and then they go to Nebraska. They ride all the way down there. And I keep thinking to myself, why don't we make them here? That's what I want to know. Why, if we're this giant country with a massive appetite for renewable energy, do we not make our own renewable energy systems here? That's the potential of Joe Biden's infrastructure plan, building something that really can transform and rebuilding, you know, American infrastructure. So, last few remarks. These are complex times. You know, I always say, pray hard and do your best. And I'm gonna stick to that. And that's kind of my advice I give to everyone. And, you know, in these hard times, we have seen a lot of pain and a lot of us are experiencing that now. But I like this picture of water, you know, because I'm a water protector. And I want to know that somehow with what we do, we're going to make sure that water can stay protected and alive and care for people because water is life. So here's some pictures of crystals taken by Dr. Emoto from Japan. I didn't really think about this, but water crystals are all different kinds. And when you pollute the water, then your crystals look kind of sad. But what we do know is that if you pray, they can get better. And so what you see here is after there's prayers for the water crystals and for the water, the Fujiwara Dam, that's much better. So pray hard and continue doing the right thing. That's what I want to say. And then, you know, what are the implications of like an indigenous worldview for a larger world? This is Evo Morales, the former president of Bolivia. And Evo Morales enacted as a part of the Constitution of Bolivia something known as the rights of Mother Earth, something that is being taken in international standards in Australia and New Zealand, in India, and here on the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota, where we say that the rights of Mother Earth to continue to exist supersede the rights of corporations. You know, because fundamentally, that's what I know is that Mother Earth has a right to live, as does her water. And that's how the Creator intends it. And that is why the indigenous thinking, you know, represented by someone like Evo Morales, needs to be part of the laws, you know, in our countries. Last couple of slides, and then it's just be some dogs raising heck downstairs. But this is kind of the reverse of Manifest Destiny. I really like this graphic, and I like the story that it tells because it is really important that we make things right. And I believe the indigenous people are part of making things right. This is my investment plan or my retirement plan. I'm not sure what my 401k will be worth, but I am sure that these young women, raising them as leaders, will do great things. And, in the time of pandemic, Aaron Dottie Roy, the great Indian writer, refers to pandemic as portal. It is a time to care for the generations that are to come. This is my organization, Honor the Earth. I'm, happy to be with you tonight. Happy to share with you in Miigwech. Thank you very much for your time.
That was phenomenal. Thank you so much, Winona, for sharing your time and your thoughts with us. Thank
you. Thank you. I'm going to go close this door so the dogs don't bark so much. I'm sorry. That's what happens sometimes when you're at home. There, I'm back. Sorry about that. I just wanted to not have to fight with them.
Yeah, not a problem at all. It happens. We wanted to now jump into some questions from the SMU human rights community, if that sounds good to you. So I guess I can also quickly reintroduce myself for people who have joined. My name is Ash T. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm a junior with the Human Rights Program. And I'm also in the process of exploring my own Indigenous heritage, so I'm particularly excited for tonight's event. Our first question is related to the way that you spoke about the need for flourishing biodiversity, but also when you showed those magnified water crystals as a way to see the ways water lives. That really struck me. And one of our questions then is, in your work, what's the relationship between Western science and traditional ecological knowledge?
What a great question. I have to say that I go with the Indigenous knowledge first, because we've been around a while, and so we have this knowledge that now they're just finding. I was really interested. I was looking at this article. Did you know that there's like an 8-mile cliff of petroglyphs in the Amazon? Did you see this? Like, you look it up, it's like Amazon jungle. And so they just found this. It's 12,500 years old and it's 8 miles long. And it's like this tremendous set of stories. Now, someone was down there for a pretty long time keeping track of stuff, right? That's why I believe in Indigenous knowledge, because it has a pretty long track record, 12,500 years. You know some stuff. And then, I think that it's important because I think that science, obviously, there's a lot of value to science, so I don't want to discount that. But I want to say that, science is learning. Like, just take climate change. We pretty much have no idea what we're doing. One, let's just take the pandemic. What do you know about a virus? Like, it's alive. It's going to change. You're going to get a new mutation. What'd your science say about that? I think that we all understand. I'm saying, like, I think that the Indigenous wisdom says you leave the wild things alone, and the bat that brought the coronavirus to us in the Chinese, woods or whatever should have been left alone, right? Leave the stuff alone and you'll be much better. Don't go ask questions about the bat. Don't destroy his habitat. Anyway, that's kind of a long answer, but thank you for your question.
Yeah, that's an incredible answer with such a great insight. You showed in your PowerPoint as well, like you're being recently arrested for protesting the pipeline. And as human rights scholars and organizers, we are all developing a human rights praxis. And as an organizer, we were wondering, how do you weigh the risk in participating in actions and leading actions?
Very good question. Okay, so there's different things to look at. First of all, I direct an organization. So on one hand, I have access to legal counsel, right? I have a lot of access to legal counsel, but I also have a board of directors that's like, don't do something that's going to put the organization in jeopardy. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so, because I'm a target, for the police. So on one hand, I spend a lot of my time as a police liaison. all summer. I mean, I talked to so many police because there's a lot of like young Black and brown youth who should not be dealing with the police at all, because the police are not going to treat them fairly, right? But I'm going to stand, I'm going to stand up for our rights. I'm going to be firm. I'm going to push back when the police, when Enbridge is literally at the site and is telling the policeman what to do. And I'm going to be like, no, this is where we are allowed to stand because this is a public right of way, right? So pick your place. There's a lot of things to do. Not everybody get arrested. Sometimes you got the police liaison, somebody you've got the, legal observer, you know what I'm saying? I learned a lot more about this, but, have a little bit of a team, right? And think about what it is you're doing, and then get assessment of the terrain. I mean, as I explained, this was like a crazy thing because it's entirely, that every cop in Minnesota is getting paid by Enbridge for like a year. That's crazy, so there was definitely a lot of us going to get arrested. I I avoided getting arrested alone, get arrested with a group, got some advice, figure out what the charges are going to be. I mean, these are the kind of things that, I don't want to get arrested. I want the system to work, but I was forced to get arrested, because this system didn't work. And so the only way to really show that this was a problem was to stand there, so have legal counsel, have friends, figure out the assessment, figure out if you got a bail fund, or, these are the kind of things that they will advise you. But then on the other hand, I must say that, be cautious, because there's a lot of other things to do besides being arrested. And know your risk. Which is what you're asking me. I had it sussed out in most of the counties, but I was arrested with 6 women, right? And then those women all got released, and they remanded me to another county, and I was going to be, they said I had to go to another county, and they asked me the next day. And so I asked to be remanded to that county early because I knew that my family was in that county and I knew the sheriff. And so I didn't want to be in a jail as an Indian woman myself in a county I didn't know. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. I was like, so that's like women of color, pick your situation and have good jail support and have someone keeps track of you. But, I'm not going to tell people to get arrested. That'd be illegal. I'm just going to say, I did just get arrested. And so, and I didn't like it, but I didn't like them either. And I was like, and the other thing is that we practiced our jailhouse rock. I practiced very much on all my singing and my dance routines because I was arrested with 5 other women or 6 other women. And so we sang a lot.
That's incredible. I think that like singing a lot, knowing your risk is definitely something you have to navigate. And then also as women of color, navigating like carceral systems and our practice of organizing is so important. And thinking about that, our next question is about Native Americans facing high rates of incarceration, police brutality, and surveillance. How are issues surrounding policing in prison linked to Indigenous marginalization as well?
We call this the Deep North. You just saw the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. That's Wisconsin, the next state over. That is the Deep North. That's what it looks like. So I, four nights ago, I looked at the jail roster in the county next to the reservation. 38% of the people in jail were from my village, right? We're less than 2% of the population in that county, but we were 38% of the people in jail. Now that snapshot could be anywhere in the Deep North, but that is the same statistics you're going to have for other people of color in the criminal justice system. And so, that is part of what I am hoping that people learn out of the experience we just had, in northern Minnesota fighting Line 3, is that what they just witnessed, of all of these people getting arrested is actually more the norm. And, the other thing is that I met with the Attorney General, and, our case, we actually have this video. I'll share it with you. The Shell River 7 Jackson Round, this video. But I said to the Attorney General, I said, I want my charges dropped and I want a medal. That's what I told him. Because I'm not a criminal, I'm a water protector. They didn't defend the waters of Minnesota from the Canadian multinational. I did, I did my damnedest and they arrested me. So my point is like, also, we're on the right side of history. This is, the epic, times that people have been in through all these social movements. We're on the right side of history and the law is wrong. And so that's why we're going to stay on this side of history and we're going to stand for what's right, right? This is so much fun. Nobody ever asks me these questions.
Well, I really enjoyed myself as well. I'm just telling you what I think, and I guess that's what but yeah. I never really talked about my arrest so much either. That's like, so, kind of like, but I'm obviously not ashamed of it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. They're the ones that should be ashamed, Absolutely. They should be. And like thinking in that, like SMU is located in the Deep South, right? And so the South has a history of racial injustice and often viewed as divorced from the issues of the Deep North. And we kind of were talking about as a program, like how are these, issues like of the Deep North and the Deep South intertwined, and how can we bridge solidarity to address them?
Well, I think that the George Floyd trial kind of woke up a bunch of people, right? And I think that surging of the Black Lives Matter movement, has been so significant in, broadening the movement for understanding, of what is going on with the police systems in this country. And I think that, what happened with Line 3, people came up to meet me. I camped from May till August on the river. And some Somali people, representatives of the Somali community came to see me. And they were talking about the police brutality in Minneapolis. And they were like, how's it going up here? And I said, it's not going so well. And so there was this like total understanding of, this is crazy. And so I think the more that we push on that, the better. And I think that the underlying issues are, to me, the underlying issues are, why are we facing charges? What about land back? What about justice? What about economic justice? What about land justice? What about, reparations? That's the kind of things that we, because this didn't just happen that we started showing up in jail at those high numbers. It's not because we are, you understand what I'm saying. So I think that the more that we work at not only addressing the issues of injustice in the criminal justice system, but also address the justice of economic justice, of justice with Mother Earth, of, working to make a better world, that's the way to do it, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing about this with us. Incarceration is such a crucial piece of thinking about connections across North America. And it's really great to hear you sharing about that. You did just now throw out all these questions about what about land justice, economic justice, all of that. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit more, if you can, about the ways climate justice is closely connected to Indigenous liberation and justice.
Well, first of all, we're all in the same canoe. I don't know what else to say. My ability to harvest wild rice is contingent upon my ability to protect my water and my ability to keep large Canadian multinationals from destroying the planet, and my entire life is based on this ecosystem, as is that of, our people. And so, I feel like that the questions that, there's the urgency of the situation is entirely related to the urgency of our ability to survive. And it's really not just an Indigenous issue. Code Red for the Mother Earth doesn't say just code red for Indigenous people. You know, we're definitely, you know, at the front of this, and you know, but in the end, we all drink the same water, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. It really is so deeply connected. And that's something we spoke about with our panel of local activists even earlier too, just talking about this work in Dallas, Texas, everything.
Right,
so
ballot access. I was just talking to somebody about that today. Is that what you just said, ballot access?
No, but it's important.
Oh, yeah. And then there's
Yeah.
ballot access. Oh yeah, no, but that's, you know, somebody was just asking me about getting out the vote. I mean, you know, the fact that the squad, you know, came up to see us, AOC could not come, you know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you know, I mean, those people are in office because of people like us, right? You know, so let's organize to get out the vote on this. Oh, here, no, I'm not going to share the screen. I'm going to put into the chat. That's what I'm trying to do. Oh, they can all see my screen. I was trying to, this is this music. And maybe at the, I'm going to give it to you. I don't know how I did that. Oh, I did it with my fingers, what I did. Okay, I'm going to put this in the chat. And then if you want to play this, like kind of at the end or something, this is a great video. I mean, I think it's great, but it shows our arrests. No, I just sent it to, Bethany. Okay. Right, and it's just, but it's really, it just really shows the multiracial community that came together to protect the water. And I just I feel proud to be one of the, you know, I feel so proud to be a water protector and you know, with the other 999 people who got arrested.
Absolutely. Yeah, we shared that link in the chat with all our participants. So everyone should go
Yeah,
and check
really
that out.
Show.
Yeah. So you also, along with this activism and leading your organization, you've also published 3 books. I'd love to talk about that a little bit. So Recovering the Sacred, in that book, you talk about different struggles for land and life, specifically, for example, telescopes. You look at observatory in Arizona, but also Mauna Kea in Hawaii. So kind of a twofold question of what have you gained from this wider perspective of Indigenous organizing? And then also, how do you negotiate your position as an Indigenous scholar in this work?
Great question, you know. I mean, the fact that I used to bum around the world helped me be a pretty good scholar. You know what I'm saying? Is it's like universities would bring me someplace that I'd say, oh, I'm gonna go see those Indians right now. You know, and so I'd go to the Northwest, then I'd go see the Nez Perce. You know, so universities helped me, really gave me a lot of access. Then I meet really cool Native students too. And so I'd be like, oh yeah, let's go. You know, so I've always felt a commitment to being someone who helps tell stories. You know, I mean, and in some ways, my ability to travel around, you know, for various reasons, you know, you get to be kind of like a bard. Does that make sense? Do you remember those guys, the bards from Europe? And they'd like go announce and they tell stories that they heard from someplace else. Well, that's what I get to be like, you know, kind of a modern day bard, but, you know, I'm an Indigenous woman. And I've always, you know, kind of felt responsible for that. Does that make sense? Like if you see something and people ask me, they're like, would you tell this story? Or, you know, I'm like, yeah, do my best. So I feel like that, you know, when you're telling the story, you have a responsibility to do your best and to tell it to different audiences. Or you could, you know, I mean, this is you know, an informal conversation, but, you know, formal lectures, but academic articles. I mean, sometimes I write those too. But, you know, I think it's a responsible thing to do. Don't like, well, you know, I feel responsible for what people tell me and my ability to tell their story and show that, you know, they're not only their courage, but their vision. So I feel good about that, and try to balance it. And then, you know, as far as being an academic scholar, that's a lot of footnotes. Oh my gosh, so much footnotes. But you know that, you guys are in school. You know, I mean, that is like, and one time I was testifying at a hearing, you know, I hear a funny story. So, you know, here y'all hung out with me and, you know, I went to Harvard, I'm an economist. I got like a lot of field experience. I'm pretty smart. So I'm testifying at this hearing as an expert witness, right? Expert witness, that's what I'm called. And I'm down there in New Mexico testifying on this carbon capture, this carbon discussion on how much carbon the coal utilities can have at the Public Utilities Commission, or is it the Public Service Commission, Public Service, and I'm testifying, and then I get cross-examined by the power company, you know, and he gets up there and he says, it was the funniest thing. He's like 2 hours. It's like 10 at night. I'm up there and he's like, your citation here says here that it's from this, like it's written testimony. I said, yep. That's why it says that. He just said, you know, he does like 2 of those. And I said, are you gonna ask me anything substantive, or are you just gonna check my footnotes? You know? And then, I mean, this is me. It's like, and the commissioners are like, I mean, because he's just like kind of making a bit of a fool of himself. And then he says, well, who said this in your testimony? He said, this is written here. It's not footnoted. I said, I said that. He said, you said it? I said, I'm the expert witness. I mean, I was like, that's why I'm here, buddy. I'm the expert. So I get to say things and they don't all have to be footnoted, you know? But it was just like, so you keep your footnotes good and know your stuff. That's the moral to that story. And then just hold your ground, you know? I mean, there's no reason to bluff. The truth is more blistering than a lie, you know, on most of these things. And, you know, but I just laughed at him, you know. I mean, I didn't laugh, but in my little way, I was laughing at him and his silliness, because I was like, yeah, well, you asked me footnote page 243.
That is such a ridiculous and hilarious in the way that you can't do anything other than laugh, because how do you react to that, right? Story. Also a good piece of advice for us going into final season on campus, which didn't show up expecting tonight, but I appreciate it anyways. Always check our sources. We have one more question to wrap us up tonight. Thank you so much again for sharing your time.
Oh, thank you. It was super fun.
Absolutely. So in this same work, Recovering the Sacred, of yours, you say that the concept of Holy Land cannot be exclusive in a multicultural and multi-spiritual society. So one more twofold question with this. Can you talk a little bit more about the way you understand land and sacred land, but also the role that colonial frameworks and other faith traditions play in this multicultural and multi-spiritual environment?
Yeah, I mean, I always think about this. The US was founded on the precepts of religious freedom, but for who? Native people didn't have freedom of religion until 1978 with the passage of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Now that's totally wrong, that we don't have religious freedom, and in, I mean, I continue to have my religious freedom violated by the state of Minnesota and the Enbridge company, I mean, so I feel like that, that's, I heard the panel before and talking about Deb Haaland, I mean, I think that the Chaco Canyon win is so good, and there's so many more, I know in her heart, she would have liked to help us on line 3. And it makes me angry what makes me angry is when white governors like Tim Walz, who has a running mate, the lieutenant governor of Minnesota is a Native woman from my reservation, or presidents like Joe Biden appoint Native people to senior political positions and then make them go against what they know is right and compromise their Native identity. And I feel like that Deb Haaland would have really liked to help us, but she was not allowed to. And I know that, because I know that she opposed line 3. And I know that in the state of Minnesota, it is the same thing. And so when Deb Haaland gets to do something right, I'm sure she feels good about it, And I think that that's really a lesson for multicultural democracy. I mean, you cannot just appoint people and ask them to act like white people, You need to, bring people in and let them be their indigenous selves, And I have to say that Joe Biden just appointed Chuck Sams to head the National Parks Service. And that was like the coolest thing. Like, you know what? Chuck Sams was my student. Isn't that great? You know, I was like, oh, and he was really a smart young man, and he still is. He's not a smart young man. He's a smart, 50-year-old man or 40. I don't know how old the guy is. But my point is that we hope that Native people are, move into leadership to make a multicultural democracy. And that means that we get to think as Indigenous people. That's how a multicultural democracy works, is you get to be you. So thank you so much for, having me down there. What's the weather like down there?
Today the high was in the 70s, but at night it's getting to maybe 40s, 50s. I don't know. I just kind of show up and take a layer and go.
Just kind of wondering, since I don't fly around so much anymore, are you guys having classes remotely, or are you having all classes in person?
Fully in person on our campus right now. Yeah, for better or for worse.
And so then what, you just mask up and go to class?
Yes, so masks aren't even required in our school right now, but maybe a third or half of our students are still masking. In our human rights office, we strongly recommend it. But
I'm sure that you're all really happy to be back with your peers who are students and not with your parents.
Oh, absolutely. Living at home for a year, doing class on my computer, the strangest thing. Matt is laughing as if they can relate.
I can imagine. I was you once. And I also have children. But anyway, thank you. Thank you so much for the honor of being with you. And I wish you all the best in your studies. And I'll make sure y'all have my email up here if you want to come visit us up north. Okay, at Honor the Earth, and experience the deep north or anything.
Absolutely. I'll pass it off to Beth for a short closing for participants.
Yeah. No, there it is. I sent it to you, Bethany.
Thank you.
I think you might have had it. Thank you. So anyway, y'all have a good evening and the rest of your events.
Thank you so much for coming. We really, really appreciate you just sharing your thoughts and your insights. I have like a million notes that I've scribbled down over here. So it's been really great to just have an informal, just awesome conversation. I also wanted to take a second to play the video since we have a little bit of time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, let me share my screen.
You'll like it. I really like it.
Yeah, let me do it really quickly. Actually, okay, click on it.
Yeah, that's where I live, by that river.
And the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous.
You got it?
Looks like they're doing it. They've had windows up for moderating.
Yeah, I had a couple of windows open, and I think
I know. I was gonna say I could price share it if you can't, but I think you got it. I heard it.
Yes, let me see. Teresa Acosta, our lovely director, will be sharing the video. Give us 1 second.
That's my grandson too.
And the river opens for the righteous, 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 and the river opens for the righteous someday. I was walking with my brother, and he wondered what's on my mind. I said, but I believe in my soul, ain't what I see with my eyes, and we can turn our back this time. I am a patriot, and I love my country, because my country is all I know. I wanna be with my family, people who understand me. I've got nowhere else to go. And the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous someday. And I was talking with my sister, she looked so fine. I said, baby, what's on your mind? She said, I want to run like the lion, released from the cages, released from the rages, burning in my heart tonight. Yeah. And I ain't no communist, and I ain't no capitalist, and I ain't no socialist, and I ain't no imperialist, and I ain't no Democrat, so ain't no Republican. I only know one party, and it is freedom. I am a patriot, and I love my country, because my country is all I know. And the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous someday. And the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous, and the river opens. I wanna run like the lion for the righteous, and the river opens. Release from the cage for the righteous, and the river opens. Release from the rage for the righteous, and the river opens. Said when I believe in my soul for the righteous, and the river opens. It ain't that I see with my eyes for the righteous, and the river opens for the righteous.
Thanks for sharing that video with us. And also thank you for sharing the insights with us. It has been so incredible. This is the end of our formal panel, and I really want to thank you for coming. The SMU human rights community is available to everyone in Clements 109. We're an awesome department, and the Human Rights Council would love to see you all. Feel free to stay in touch with us by following us on social media. And for students on campus, make sure to join us for Puppies and Pastries and Finals Week, which will be on December 7th. Thank you all so much and have a great night.
Miigwech.